Alright everybody, it's first thing Saturday morning. We can kind of see the little South American bumblebee sticking his nose out of the tank right there, but I'm not going to worry about it. It never really comes out on video. We're just in here getting the tanks turned on this morning. I've got two tanks that are under treatment right now. One for Columnaris, which I'm pretty sure I've taken care of. And then the other one is my 125 gallon tank. I have an Ick outbreak. So that's the tank down there that's being treated for Columnaris. And under here somewhere is the light switch for it. So that turns on that tank. And it turns on my gourami tank here. Fortunately, no issues with this tank yet. And likewise, no issues here in my angelfish tank. At least none that I know of. I will point out while I'm here really quickly, if you see my female angelfish in the back, she's actually starting to look pretty old. She looks gravid right now. She actually looks like she's all blown up with eggs, so we might see some spawning behavior really soon. But I've been noticing over the last month or so that she's getting a little more raggedy looking, a little more listless. Her color's starting to get a little more dull. So she might be starting to wind down a little bit here. But at any rate, we're going to keep an eye on her and everybody else. So let's get the black ghost knifefish tank lit up. Maybe there's the slightest chance we'll actually get to see the black ghost knifefish, but it does not look like it. It's already in its normal cave. Opaline gourami is still in there looking beautiful. And here we go with the native tank. Let's see what we can see. Well, so far, everything looks pretty much normal. That little minnow is still in there. That little minnow does have some markings behind its head, which would be kind of where you would expect to see Columnaris. But I don't know if that's actually the Columnaris or if that is just simple injury and damage from being struck at. I've got so much salt in this tank that there should, in theory, be no way the Columnaris can live. But I don't know. There's my largemouth bass. That was, I'm smart. I keep calling him a largemouth. Smallmouth bass. And then there's the Mayan cichlid. So those are the only two fish I was really worried about being impacted by the salt. And honestly, I wasn't even worried about the Mayan cichlid. I believe the Mayan cichlid could probably go up into brackish water. I'm not positive about that, but I think they are euryhaline. The bass, however, I know is not. But I don't know what level of salinity they can tolerate before they start reacting poorly. So my concern was that the high level of salt, and by high level I mean I have about a tablespoon of salt per gallon of water in here. Not a teaspoon, a tablespoon of salt per gallon. So that should be more than enough to kill the Columnaris off, and you can even sort of see how fuzzy everything looks. So it's definitely having some sort of effect, but now that I'm seeing these marks on that shiner, I'm beginning to wonder. I still think that's just injury. I don't think that's actually from the Columnaris. Let's see if we don't get a little bit of crayfish attacking here. Alright, well, this video is not to look at the tanks necessarily. This video is to check on the progress of these tanks, and this one switch back here actually turns this whole side on. So this is the tank I am most concerned with. I am treating it for ick. I will do some more video on that later. I'm pretty sure I understand how the ick got in here and what's going on. I've been looking at some of my former videos and some of the timelines of when I moved fish from one tank to another. And the long story short, let me go turn my overhead light off here now that we got the tanks lit up. The long story short is that I brought ick in, I believe, from my native tank, which would have come from some of the wild caught fish that I brought over. And then I recently added this tilapia here, and in the process of bringing it over, I got the ick in the tank. Again, I'll go into more details in another video, and we'll have a whole discussion about how all this is unfolding. So yesterday, I noticed first on my Tenopoma here, you can see these little tiny white spots all over it. And as I started looking around the tank, I noticed that a lot of the other fish in this tank have little white spots all over them. So that is definitely ick. And I've begun treating the tank with a product called Ick Attack. It's an all-natural product. It's not really harsh. You can use it on scaleless fish. And now I'm actually starting to see some spots on my larger clown loach. Yesterday I saw some spots on the small clown loach, and now I'm actually starting to see some spots on the larger clown loach on its tail and everything. So I'm treating with Ick Attack. It's an all-natural product. It's safe to use for inverts and scaleless fish, and I've never had a problem with it before. It works really well. It takes care of the ick. But at the time, I wasn't 100% certain that it was ick. I was afraid, I was terrified actually, that I had brought that Columnaris, or Columnaris. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce that. I think it's Columnaris. The bacteria is shaped like little columns, and that's where it gets its name, so it should be pronounced Columnaris or whatever. Anyway, I thought I brought that over, and I was terrified that I was going to wipe out this tank in a matter of days like I did with my native tank by introducing that very, very deadly bacteria into the tank. So I salted this tank as well, although I went very, very light on the salt in this tank. I only went 1 teaspoon per gallon, which is right around the threshold where you start killing off the bacteria, but it's not so much that most fish can tolerate it. So last night I started getting a little concerned because I do have some fish in this tank. While I'm not 100% sure of their needs, I'm pretty sure they come from soft water, and putting a lot of salt in the water would not be a good idea. And the fish I'm speaking about, I've been looking for all morning, and yet I still have not seen one of them, are my little ancestress and hypancestress catfish. They're commonly called plecos, but they're not technically. I've got a bristlenose, and then I've got 3 chocolate zebras in here. The bristlenose is the ancestress, and the zebras are the hypancestress species. And I don't believe they can tolerate salt very well at all. And last night I was noticing one of the chocolate zebras didn't look very good. Look, we've even got spawning behavior going on behind the tilapia down there. You can see the rainbow fish down there dancing and spawning, so that's interesting. Maybe the salt in the water is something they like. I'm sure it probably is. A lot of rainbow fish are euryhaline and can actually deal with brackish water. Now that's also a pretty big cave down there. I can actually slide my gravel vac all the way underneath this piece of wood. It's like big open hollow space underneath this piece of wood. So something might be going on down there. There might be a dead fish or something in there that those other fish are trying to get in there to get. But that looked like spawning behavior to me. At any rate, last night I was having a final look at the tank late in the evening, and I noticed that one of the little chocolate zebras didn't look too good, and I thought, you know what, I got to get some of this salt out of this tank. So I did about a 10% water change and reduced the salt, and while I was doing it, I noticed an otocinclus was in there swimming around, all funny and lopsided, and it was probably on death's door as well, and I can only assume that that was from the salt. I'm assuming otocinclus are also very freshwater, or very soft water type fish. There we go. If you see on the underside here, you can see one of my chocolate zebras, so at least it's still alive, which I was concerned that the salt might be killing it more so than the ick. So there's one of them. There's another. You can see it silhouette right here. And then the one that looked rough was down here underneath this piece of wood last night, which is what leads me to believe it could be under there, alive or dead. I guess we won't know until we open the box and check. And then I'm missing also a long-finned bristlenose that I don't see either. So I'm definitely going to be keeping my eye on this tank. The issues I'm having with those fish, I believe, is due to the salt I put in the tank, not the ick. The ick I'm on top of. I'm not concerned about the ick. I've caught that early enough. You can see the little white spots all over him. It really surprises me, though, as a lot of people have pointed out, that the loaches were not the first ones to just be covered in it. And this guy, who doesn't spend a lot of time near the bottom, who is one of the more dominant fish in the tank, and has quite thick, heavy scaling on it, that's my most infected fish in the tank. These almost scaleless fish of the loaches, they're not technically scaleless, but they get called scaleless, The reason they get called scaleless is they have tiny, tiny little scales that are actually embedded in their skin. So for all intents and purposes, their skin is exposed to the water, but they do have scales in their skin. It's an odd sort of way the loaches are set up. But the loaches are still considered scaleless fish. So if you're using meds and it says, you know, be careful with scaleless fish, etc., loaches are considered scaleless fish, even though they are not technically. So they should, in theory, be far more susceptible to the ick than the scaled fish. In particular, this guy who's got pretty much armor plating, and yet he is the most infected. So I find that interesting. I don't really know what to make of that just yet. So at any rate, there's your Saturday morning update. It could have been a lot worse. It's about what I expected to find. I was really dreading coming down here and finding some dead plecos on the bottom of my tank because of the salt overnight. But everything seems to be doing okay. So now it's just going to be a matter of getting the ick out of here. And then, of course, I've still got that other native tank with the outbreak that I've got to get on top of. And, of course, that means I need to start changing the way I do things here in the fish room. So lots of video coming up on all that kind of stuff. Make sure you're subscribed. You're not going to want to miss any of that. I'm going to be talking about this ick. I'm going to be talking about how I got it and transferring it from one tank to the other. I want to talk about my very poor husbandry practices as far as, you know, swapping fish from tank to tank and bringing in fish from the wild and slapping them in fish tanks, and my personal recklessness down here is what's basically been causing me all these problems that I've been having, and it's been a bit of a wake-up call. So in the very near future, we will be doing some videos about that and talking about all these different issues I'm having and all these different problems that have been going on. So as I said, make sure you're subscribed. That way you won't miss any of that or anything else I got coming up. Don't forget, this one is my 125-gallon tank. And then, of course, I also have the 125-gallon native tank that we just looked at. So thanks again for watching this one. I'll see you real soon in the next one.